The desert air lay heavy and still, carrying a quiet tension that felt almost alive, as if the land itself had sensed the shift in the undercurrents of power. Near the rugged outskirts of southern Iran, far from cities, far from curious eyes, a massive steel door embedded deep into a mountainside began to tremble. Dust rose in faint spirals as the hydraulic systems hissed, awakening the ground beneath. Inside that mountain, illuminated by orange industrial lights and the glow of countless screens, engineers and officers moved with practiced urgency. They were preparing for the unveiling of a weapon no observer, no rival intelligence agency, and no military strategist had fully anticipated, a cruise missile whose specifications aligned with something dangerously close to a Tomahawk-Class system, but with capabilities designed in near-total secrecy. It was a weapon that did not simply signal technological progress, it signaled a shift in the entire military balance of the region. At the center of the underground chamber rested a long, sleek missile on a reinforced horizontal launcher. Its surface was matte gray, broken only by faint serial codes and narrow maintenance marking lines running along its frame. Every inch of it displayed precision manufacturing. The nose cone was sharper than earlier Iranian designs, clearly meant for both high accuracy and low radar visibility. This was not a theoretical model. This was a fully operational cruise missile that had successfully undergone silent field tests in remote sectors of the Gulf and along the country's rugged plains. Only a handful of high-ranking officials in the country knew the full extent of its capabilities. Some engineers believed it exceeded the classic Tomahawk in speed. Some believed its guidance system, rumored to be an Iranian hybrid blending digital terrain mapping, optical scene matching, and satellite assistance, could rival Western systems. Whether those rumors were exaggerated or underestimated, no one beyond these walls knew. Technicians in dark uniforms performed their final inspections, checking diagnostics through handheld tablets connected to the missile's internal core. They monitored the readings that flowed across the screens: fuel pressure, processor temperature, stabilization functions, and terrain-following radar systems. Every value had to align with perfection. Any deviation could compromise not only the launch but also the secrecy that had shrouded the program for years. Failure was not an option. The missile had been designed for a strategic demonstration, an unannounced test launch that would streak across controlled desert airspace and land in a predetermined impact zone more than 1,000 kilometers away. The purpose of this test was not merely technical. It was political, psychological, and symbolic. In a quiet observation booth overlooking the chamber, a senior military commander watched the preparations with clasped hands. He had spent his career studying the strategies of world powers, how they spoke through weapons, how they shifted alliances with displays of reach, speed, and precision. For years, Iran had faced sanctions, aerial surveillance, and foreign assessment that undermined the idea of technological parity. But today, he knew, was a turning point. Once this missile left its launcher and was detected by global monitoring systems, every major intelligence agency would scramble. Analysts would try to identify the propulsion signature. Radar operators would question how a missile flew so low and so silently across desert valleys. Experts would debate whether the weapon was indigenous or reverse engineered, whether it posed a threat to naval fleets or critical infrastructure, whether it represented a shift in regional deterrence. The world would speculate, but speculation meant uncertainty, and uncertainty was power. Outside the mountain, the wind carried sand in long streaks across the barren land. The sky was turning a deep crimson as the sun prepared to dip behind the distant horizon. The desert, though vast and empty, seemed to hum with anticipation. A row of mobile communication vehicles stood by, their satellite dishes angled skyward, receiving encrypted signals from command. Soldiers in camouflaged gear secured the perimeter, scanning the desert in all directions. The area had been temporarily restricted to all air and ground movement under the guise of standard military exercises. Nothing about this day was ordinary, but the world beyond these hills would not know that until it was too late. Back inside, the commander gave a single nod. The launch coordinator turned to his team and issued the first activation order. A low vibration pulsed through the floor as auxiliary power systems transferred energy into the missile's onboard electronics. The status lights flickered from red to amber to a stabilizing, unwavering green. The guidance computer came online, loading terrain mapping files and initializing its autonomous navigation sequences. In the dim glow of the control panels, an engineer quietly murmured that all systems were locked and stable. The giant steel door covering the launch exit began to open fully now, revealing a long, reinforced tunnel stretching into blackness. Air rushed inward as the pressure equalized, and overhead ventilation units roared to life. A warm, dusty breeze swept through the chamber, fluttering the edges of papers clipped to consoles. This was the moment everyone had trained for, rehearsed, and dreamed of. Even those who did not outwardly show emotion felt their pulse quicken. They knew they were witnessing something historic. When the initiation sequence began, the missile made no grand sound, no thunderous roar, no explosion of flames. Instead, it emitted a deep mechanical hum and slid forward smoothly as internal boosters activated. Then, with a sudden burst of acceleration, the cruise missile shot through the tunnel, exiting the mountain with astonishing speed. The desert lit up for only a fraction of a second, illuminated by the faint glow of the missile's tail emissions. The sand kicked up in swirling clouds as the projectile climbed only a few meters above ground, then leveled out into an ultra-low altitude flight path. The engineers watched its telemetry on their screens in real time. Speed. Stable. Altitude. Precise and dangerously low. Guidance. Tracking terrain contours perfectly. This was the advantage of a cruise missile designed for stealth. It hugged the Earth so closely that conventional radar systems struggled to detect it. Within seconds, the missile had traveled far beyond visual distance, weaving between hills, gliding through narrow desert corridors, and slipping past any potential observer. Far away from the launch site, inside a confidential operations van, analysts tracked the missile from an aerial reconnaissance drone. The drone flew at a safe distance, capturing ultra-high-definition footage of the missile slicing through the desert with ghost-like smoothness. The missile's aerodynamic body allowed it to move almost silently except for a faint, distant whine that disappeared into the wind. The drone camera zoomed in. The missile's surface remained cool, its structure unshaken by turbulence, its path unwavering. It flew like a predator locked onto an invisible line only it could see. As it raced across the desert, the landscape transformed. Rocky formations grew taller, the ground shifted into jagged terrain, and the sky darkened as scattered clouds drifted overhead. Yet the missile did not ascend. It dropped even lower, skimming only meters above uneven ground. Its sensors scanned every rise and fall, adjusting its flight with microsecond corrections. The terrain matching algorithm compared real-time images with digital maps stored in its onboard memory, ensuring that it remained perfectly hidden beneath radar coverage. Meanwhile, international monitoring networks picked up a faint anomaly. A signature so subtle, so briefly detected, that at first analysts dismissed it as noise. But when the anomaly reappeared 20 kilometers further along the desert, then again another 20 kilometers after that, analysts realized this was no accident. Something fast and stealthy was moving across Iranian airspace with a trace too sharp to be natural but too quiet to belong to known missiles. Intelligence teams scrambled to identify the object. The propulsion signature did not match Iran's previously catalogued cruise missiles. The radar profile was minuscule, suggesting advanced engineering. The anonymous object continued forward, heading toward an isolated impact zone far beyond the reach of satellites that could confirm its origin. Inside the mountain base, the commander watched the final telemetry numbers with a sense of controlled pride. He observed how effortlessly the missile navigated through complex topography. He noted the stability of the flight and the exactness of its speed. Every calculation had aligned. Every modification, every new component, every line of programming had come together to create a weapon capable of startling even the most prepared adversary. The missile approached its target zone, an abandoned stretch of plateau chosen for its safety and isolation. As it neared the final point, it rose slightly for the first time during its journey, gaining enough altitude to angle itself precisely. Then, with clinical accuracy, it executed a controlled dive. A brief flash illuminated the sky, followed by a shockwave rolling across the desert. The drone captured the plume rising in perfect symmetry, confirming that the missile had hit its exact coordinates within centimeters. In the mountain base, applause did not break out. That was not the culture here. Instead, there were firm nods, tight smiles, and the quiet satisfaction of people who understood the magnitude of what they had achieved. The commander stood still for a moment, reflecting. This weapon was not merely a demonstration of range or accuracy. It was a message, silent but unmistakable. The world would soon know that Iran possessed a cruise missile operating in a class far beyond previous assessments. And wherever such knowledge reached, it would reshape strategies, calculations, and assumptions long held by both rivals and allies. As the desert winds settled over the cooling wreckage of the impact site, and as the sky darkened fully into night, the missile left behind more than scorched earth. It left behind a new reality, a new chapter in regional power. And though no headlines had yet been written, no analysts had reached their conclusions, everyone who had witnessed the launch understood one undeniable truth: nothing in the region would remain as it was. A weapon meant to stay unseen had made its presence known, not through public display, but through precision, silence, and a shockwave that would echo far beyond the desert that had hidden it.